Well, this is a 1967 Pontiac GTO. It's got a 400 cubic inch engine and 360 horsepower, 4-speed transmission. It's exactly the way it was built in 1967.
Meet Ken Grace, my guide to the muscle cars of Detroit. He had one much the same when he was 17. Detroit's teenagers won't have the option of owning a new Pontiac. General Motors has just killed the Pontiac brand. Yet another sign that one of the world's best-known companies and its hometown are in desperate trouble.
Back in the 1960s and the 70s, you could see people in the city of Detroit walking the streets, and the factories were full of cars and full of employment, some running 3 shifts. It was an honor to say, hey, I'm from Detroit. Tough city, a lot of issues, but we were proud because everybody around the world drove our vehicles.
A city which worships the car doesn't have much of a public transport system.
The next station is Millender Center.
The monorail, called the People Mover, seems more for show than effect. But it does give you an uninterrupted view of a city in decline. Once the murder capital of America, now businesses are being killed off and residents have fled. Building after building vandalised or awaiting the wrecker. Eerily too, the streets of Motor City are empty of traffic.
This is the Cadillac Center station.
The most striking thing about the centre of Detroit these days is how quiet it is. On almost every street there are signs of urban decay and a sense of desolation. There's also disbelief that the 3 big car makers could be in so much trouble. Ford, which is in the best shape, recorded a loss of $2 billion in the first 3 months of the year, and that was viewed as something of a triumph. General Motors, once the biggest car company in the world, will have to go into bankruptcy to survive.
There are no companies that are too big to fail. If Lehman can fail with its 100-year history, I think GM can fail. And I don't think it is too big to fail.
When I moved to Detroit in 1999, this town was rolling in profits from the SUV business. Everyone got bonuses that year. They even gave out free computers at Ford, and they had a plane flying around town thanking workers for their great contributions.
I never imagined that in a million years for General Motors, the #1 company in the United States, to be in this predicament. No way.
3 inches around the thighs. Isn't that impressive?
Release an Impala, only $315.
Swine flu.
Guaranteed to make you feel better.
This is not simply a story of another industrial town falling on hard times.
Monday morning we'll celebrate National Babe Ruth Day.
And few know that better than Dick Purton, Detroit's veteran, top-rating radio announcer who was spinning discs back in the 60s.
Prizes for this weekend's best sunburn.
So was there a real energy about Detroit?
Oh yeah, big time energy. Remember, in those days, Detroit would have been the 5th largest city in America.
Camaro, fiery new creation from Chevrolet.
And then I have seen in the, 45 years I've been here, it's gone from 5th to 6th to 7th to 8th to 9th to 10th, and I think currently we're the 11th rated market or city in America.
Here is motoring achievement that will satisfy the deepest human urges for comfort, for luxury, and for pleasure.
Detroit became the emblem of American know-how and can-do, the capital of US industrial prowess. But it had more. It had its very own high-energy soundtrack. And like Dick Purton's listeners, the world came to love it as well. Motown.
I was thrilled to be here because this was a real happening town. And one of the reasons it was happening was two reasons. The auto industry was thriving, people were thriving here big time, but Motown was booming.
This is a historic city because of motor cars. Motown was adapted from the name Motor City, Motown.
Martha Reeves and the Vandellas were a big hit back then. She still belts it out, but has another stage too, making law as a Detroit city councillor.
You know, it's a good feeling to have songs that you recorded when you were 21, 22 years old, and then when you sing them, you can feel that young. You can think back in total recall to the day that you recorded it.
Reeves started recording in Studio A at Motown Records. It became known as Hitsville, USA, borrowing a production style from the car industry.
In our history, Berry Gordy worked at Ford Motor Company, and he sort of ran the company as an assembly line. Once the doors opened, they never shut. We started out with 2 tracks, 2 recording tracks, moved from there to 4. Hitchhike and Stomach Kind of Fella, Come and Get These Memories, Love It's Like a Heat Wave, were all cut with 4 tracks. And we grew from there.
What would have been your favourite hit from those days that you recorded in Studio A?
Oh, you can't pick one. We've had some wonderful recordings, and they're like children.
Could you give us a burst of Heat Wave before you leave? Come on, a few bars.
It's hard to do without the band and the girls, but my favorite part is sometimes I stare into space, tears all over my face. Can't explain it, don't understand it. I ain't never felt like this before. It's time to go.
Martha Reeves will be among those Detroiters celebrating 50 years of Motown this year. But she's keenly aware that there's not much to smile about. She's watching her city run out of gas and its once great institutions being junked.
I've been asked that question. How are we surviving the fact that half of the cars in our city are foreign, that our cars aren't selling anymore? Our big 3 are considering layoffs and buyouts, and industry is not what it used to be. It used to lead the city.
A forced marriage with Fiat is Chrysler's way out of bankruptcy. The big daddy of them all, General Motors, looms as the biggest potential disaster. It's closing plants and desperately negotiating a survival strategy. People who thought they had secure jobs are facing the reality that the wheels are falling off Motor City.
Well, that's something that you feel in your stomach every day. You're thinking about it. You can't get it off your mind. You would want for just to be over, one way or the other. Let me know something. You got to do the math.
Mitch Seaton started working for General Motors 30 years ago.
So what was the image of the company then? I mean, what did you expect if you got a job with GM?
That you would be able to retire, with a certain amount of dignity, high wages, good benefits,
When we were children growing up in Michigan or in the city of Inkster or Detroit, we always knew that was the ultimate job to get because, so many people drove nice cars and had nice homes.
Carmen Seaton also works at GM. Like many families, they've been the backbone of the car industry for generations.
We have so many people. I have 4 or 5 aunts. I have 2 uncles. I have a sister, 2 brother-in-laws, and actually 2 grandfathers. Both of my grandfathers are retirees from the automotive industry.
Welcome to Dick Johnson's retirement party.
We're at one of the many branches of the United Auto Workers. The guest of honour is Dick Johnston, a veteran GM employee. There's a lot of love in the room for the committed unionist. Even so, high wages and generous health and pension benefits demanded by the union over many decades have been a factor in the car industry crisis.
Love you, man. You all right? Thanks, man. Ah, thank you, man. It's the bottom line, ain't it?
Well, when I first started, General Motors was really booming. Where I'm working at now at Willow Run Powertrain in Ypsilanti was 17,000 people when I first started. It's gone from that down to 1,600 people, which is a big drop from what it was when I first started.
In the 50s, Detroit was booming, and they built big monuments like the Spirit of Detroit. Strong, resilient, trusting in God to look after the people. Maybe. But by the 80s, Japanese and other foreign car companies had started non-union plants in America's South. They were cheaper and more efficient, and they were building the cars Americans wanted. Former GM executive Richard Kleinbaum lives about an hour's drive outside the Motor City.
They didn't believe it because they're so isolated from the marketplace. I hope will be remedied.
He says GM ignored public concern about gas guzzlers and moved too slowly to make greener cars.
Whenever there was a situation where you could do something like really hard and painful, but that would really solve the problem, or you do the minimum amount necessary, they always chose that latter path. Whether it was with the union or their own capacity or their management of their own brands, they were always very reluctant to do the hard things that would really fix the problem. The whole purpose of bankruptcy, Chapter 11 bankruptcy in North America, is to permit the kind of restructuring the company desperately needs to do. The nice thing about Chapter 11 is you can write off your debt, right? So that's the whole point.
Clean slate.
So that's the whole point.
Sarah Webster is one of the most influential voices in Detroit as the automotive editor of the Detroit Free Press.
At what point did you start to realise that it was reaching crisis point in the industry?
I think it was at the end of 2005 that we started to write about really enormous layoffs of 60 and 70 plus thousand workers. And I think that that was the time when we started to see that there was a dramatic change in the workforce taking place.
What's the feeling amongst locals now?
And it's almost like losing a loved one or something. They go through all that whole range of emotions you hear about where they're in denial and then they're angry and then they're sad and depressed.
Caught between now and a dream, curious.
Drive down almost any street in the inner city and there are boarded up houses and disused factories.
There's a dark soul hiding underneath your skin. There's a dark place hiding within.
Once grand buildings like the city's railway station have been abandoned, and yet the city seems powerless to stop urban decay and to reclaim the wastelands.
There's a dark place. There's a dark place.
All this plus a recession which locals say hit Detroit long before the rest of the country.
There's a dark place within.
Of course, there are some who prosper even in the worst of times. Jeff Darwish has been tooling around the suburbs near the Ford factories, buying and selling houses for 24 years. He might feel for the locals, but his vehicle of choice is a fancy German import. We met in Willow Street, Dearborn.
This is a middle-class area with good folks, Ford Motor Company. A lot of people work for Ford right here and work for the local hospitals and school teachers. It's a good area.
So what's happened to the value of homes?
It's plummeted. People have been saying 30%. I'd say more about 40 to 50%. This house here was in its heyday about 3 or 4 years ago, worth about $160 to $165. We just sold it for $56,000. And I didn't sell it overnight. It took about a month to sell it.
Most locals can't afford new houses or new cars. With sales down by as much as half, car yards are bulging with unsold stock. Many are the designs of the past, big, fuel-hungry vehicles. Dealers are being sacked by the big three car makers and going to the wall. This city is all about the car. You can't go anywhere or do anything without one. And despite the gloomy predictions, General Motors reckons it has a sparkling future with some fantastic vehicles to match.
Now, this is pretty plain and simple. But
this clutch of designers is looking to the future.
We've still got a little bit of work to do, but we can actually drive like.
By the time the public are presented with a product, we're 2, 3, 4 years ahead. We're doing the next cycle of product. And so we're happily in a position where we can always look to the future and recognise that everyone relies on us for the future, and that's our part in saving the company.
As they design the look of the next generation of cars, other teams are working on revolutionary concepts. The hydrogen-powered car is Mark Van's baby.
This is a very special vehicle. It's a Chevrolet Equinox fuel cell electric vehicle. It uses no petroleum whatsoever, and that the only emission is pure water vapor.
So this vehicle is a vital part of convincing the Obama administration that this company can be viable.
Absolutely. You know, we look at this as saying that this is our best foot forward. You know, that in America, you know, a lot of people, you know, have only thought of General Motors as building large SUVs. We can build very compelling vehicles.
In fact, the Obama administration is now ordering companies which are drowning in red ink to become cleaner and greener.
Ladies and gentlemen, the future of automotive transportation has entered the building.
Another of GM's green options was showcased at this year's auto show in Detroit.
I present the revolutionary Chevrolet Volt.
The Volt, as the name suggests, is an electric vehicle running on rechargeable batteries, and it's due to be on sale from next year.
Volt's wonderful, but it's not going to be a commercially important car for a very long time. Commercially important in terms of generating positive cash. And the President's task force saw that very clearly. It's basically 5 or 6 years down the road as a time horizon.
GM executives plot the company's future in the tower which dominates Detroit's skyline. But Washington is in the driver's seat.
I would love to get the U.S. government out of the auto business as quickly as possible. It was my obligation, and continues to be my obligation, to make sure that any taxpayer dollars that are in place to support the auto industry are aimed not at short-term fixes that continue these companies as wards of the state, but rather institutes the kind of restructuring that allows them to be strongly competitive in the future.
Anxious is not the word. You know, it's more like a frightening thing because someone tells you that your job is over. You've got to make some decisions. Well, you know, your life is going to change.
Mitch and Carmen Seaton are putting their faith in the new president. Back in January, they drove their motorhome for 24 hours through a snowstorm to witness his inauguration in Washington.
I dug 2 big trenches all the way out to the street. I figured if I can get it out, you know, if I can get on the freeway, we were good to go. If I didn't get stuck between here and the freeway.
So you really wanted to be there?
We were going to be there, for sure. I wanted my boys, when they're my age, to be able to say I was there because, you know, first African-American president to be inaugurated, so I wanted them to be there.
A photo of the family, with a remarkable likeness of the president, has pride of place on the living room wall.
I'm very, very frightened, but I am optimistic. I really am, especially with Obama. I believe that Obama believes, knows that we have to be here, and that he's actually going to, I believe that he's actually going to make sure that GM becomes viable.
We have to have an industrial base. Detroit has always been the industrial base. I hope that it will come back to being the industrial base. I think we have to have a sense of pride and realize who we are, and we must remain. We can't just give it all away.
Martha Reeves maintains high hopes for the Motor City and looks to the spirit of Motown.
I think Motown means a good time at a party. I think anytime you put on a Motown record, you're going to see the sunshine that the Temptations say, I got sunshine. There's sunshine in the music.
Car assembly lines lifted many African Americans into the middle class. And Motown was another ladder to success and the American dream. The people of Detroit would like to think that the glory days of the city can come again.
It's all a cycle. This place is very innovative and will rise again, and that there will be different things that come out of Detroit in the future.